Hello, friends. Brendan Riley here on behalf of Game Fight Show, along with Rob Huber and our guest, Lauren Nepomuceno. We want to take a minute before we start our episode because on Tuesday, the 23rd of March, a horrific terrorist attack in Atlanta resulted in 6 members of the Asian American community there being killed. And we felt it was important to take a few minutes to talk about that event and the role of all of us in thinking through and helping to prevent future events of a similar type. We hope you'll stay with us for a few minutes as we talk about this, and then we'll move on to the normal Game Fight Show. Welcome, Rob and Lauren.
Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for being willing to engage with us in a conversation about this tragedy.
Yes, it really is. And, I think it's important to have these discussions, no matter how challenging and difficult they can be. So I appreciate you guys bringing this up.
It affects us all. So, Lauren, I don't know if the audience all knows you, but we know you quite well. And we know that you are a proud member of the proud Filipino community. You're so generous to be willing to share with us some of your perspective, and we appreciate that greatly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I am a proud Filipino American, born and raised in Chicago my whole life, but certainly don't look like it as long as all my family members, I am 1.5 generation American, so it's really interesting. My dad was born here in St. Louis, and my mother really is born and raised in the Philippines. So I am one of those few people who've had a little bit more experience in America. But yeah, what has happened and what has unfolded over the last year and certainly in 2020 has been something that, so few Asian Americans have experienced, which is the rising and attacks of Asians, people of Asian descent, so Asian American, Pacific Islander descent in this country. And that is something that I think it's kind of obvious, and I hate to spell it out, but it's something that was kind of derived from the pandemic and where the origins of this virus came from. So, and the language around that virus and how that was spread out.
Yes, and forgive me if I throw in there that our country has a long, long history, tragic history of othering, of trying to frame the Asian community as other, as outside, as not a part. And unfortunately, up to the highest stations in the government, that's been happening, even, as you pointed out, trying to place blame for the COVID pandemic on the Asian community in a way that's ridiculous.
Right.
This is a conversation that I think shouldn't be had without the Asian community being a part of it. But I think it's a conversation not to race to the end, but I think it's just really important that people who aren't in the Asian community, if you hear someone othering the Asian community or any community, you have to have that uncomfortable conversation, if it's with a coworker, if it's with a family member, if it's with someone on the street, because I think that there is a perceived license to attack people physically and verbally that none of us can stand for.
Yeah, and I agree, especially, and we're seeing now, mainly in California though, but still, we're seeing a lot of elderly Asian Americans who are being attacked. They are literally the most vulnerable groups of people right now because not only are they physically weak, but actually in New York City, they are the poorest demographic in the city of New York. So the elderly Asians are actually, they're the lowest income generators. So there is a serious class issue and a misunderstanding that, Asians are, the crazy rich Asians that you see on Hollywood, right? That's not the case. There is still socioeconomic injustices and inequality for Asian Americans. So not to say that I'm mad that there is representation in Hollywood, but it's just that it's not a holistic view of reality or real view of Asian Americans today, and that, my community just still needs help. It's not just, yeah.
Here. Brendan, there are a couple of resources that I'm aware of, and Lauren, if there's anything that you'd like to throw out there for resources for people to look into, if you want to do some introspection, if you want to do some outreach, if you just want to have resources on hand for when you're having these difficult conversations, we will put some links in the show notes and over on the Rattlebox Games webpage. Is there anything, Lauren, any specific resource that you'd like to share with people, though, right now on the air?
Yeah, so there's a great source for Asian American news called Next Shark. They are great Asian-owned Asian journalists who have been writing about all of these incidents, as well as other organizations that they are supporting, because there's a lot of opportunities to donate. There's a GoFundMe for Stop Asian Hate. Hate is a Virus is another one. Asian Americans Advancing Justice. There's stopaapihate.org, where you could actually report incidents. So a lot of excellent organizations and opportunities to help, the Asian community.
Which is a very worthy thing to set out to do. I look forward to not having to have this conversation again soon. I look forward to hearts and minds being changed. But until then, folks, don't rest. Silence is complicity. And I really thank you so much, Lauren. This is a subject that it hurts me that we have to talk about it. But I really appreciate your choosing to share your point of view with us.
Absolutely, and thank you guys for bringing it up. It's really important to have voices out here and allies in this fight, in this good fight, right? Fighting the good fight.
Hear, hear.
Yep.
All right, my proud and groovy party gamers, you have done it. You have made it to the final bout in the semifinals. Oh boy! Here we are on Game Fight Show.
Game Fight Show.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games. And oh my, we have the March Mayhem tournament just running out of runway. We are almost there at the end. But ooh, do we have a big bout for you gamers today. We have Wingspan coming up against Lords of Waterdeep. Brendan, you and I aren't up to this challenge.
I can't do it.
I'm sorry. I know all my limitations. This is beyond them. I need to bring in some big guns to talk about these big games. Who do you have on deck for me?
Well, Rob, I brought out the biggest of guns, the saltiest of commentators, the genius of XYZ Games, Lauren Nepomuceno.
Woo! Hello.
Welcome, Lauren. Huzzah!
Lauren, I think you and I were in harmony there. Welcome aboard, Lauren. Oh, so glad to
be here,
today.
guys.
Boy. Well, we saved one of the best bouts in the whole bracket for you to talk about today. Ooh, this is a modern classic against one of the hottest games to have come out in the last little while. And I, for one, I just can't imagine how brutal this is going to be. This is going to be a knockdown, drag out bout.
It's going to be brutal.
Oh yeah, it's a nail biter for sure between these two. So can't wait.
We here at Rattlebox Games love having people from different viewpoints come in. Like, for example, I'm usually right, but I like to have Brendan here because he's usually wrong. I like to have that viewpoint.
We also engage in a little delusion, as you just heard there. But yeah, this is, I don't know that there's a harder match to decide. With the exception of whichever one follows this, I imagine the finals are going to be even tougher, but it's a brutal start. Lauren, do you have a preference where we start, Wingspan or Lords of Waterdeep?
I feel like we should talk about the classic, and I think that means we should talk Lords of Waterdeep. It's only fair that
Yeah.
they've been out in the market longer, so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that should be the one we should talk about.
Oh, yeah. Lords of Waterdeep. That's coming at you from the classic quarter. Those are 8 games here in the bracket of 32 that are tried and true games that can hold their own against the modern hotness. And that has been the story of Lords of Waterdeep here. Let's see. In their first bout, Lords of Waterdeep took out Wingspan's cousin, Viticulture. Ruthlessly.
Like a rogue in the back
Ruthlessly
alley.
took it out.
There was vino all over the ground. And then it goes up against Camel Up, everybody's favorite betting racing game. People said, we got a couple sort of modern classics here, but I mean, can anyone beat Camel Racing? Yes, the Lords of Waterdeep can.
And so this is an interesting aspect. Fair number of the games that Lords of Waterdeep has taken on here in the bracket so far have been from the wildcard divisions. Here we have Wingspan. This game, a solid performer, came out in 2019, and it has been selling. It has been being played. It has been being adored. It has been being eaten ever since it hit the tables back in 2019. It is going to be so interesting to see how Lords of Waterdeep does against one of the true current titans in the field.
Yes.
Lauren, Lords of Waterdeep. It's been in the bracket low these many weeks. We keep saying this game is one of the tightest little worker placement games out there. What do you think is going to carry Waterdeep? What is Waterdeep going to hang its hopes for beating Wingspan on?
Honestly, I think what is going to carry Lords of Waterdeep is the fact that it is a classic strategy board game, and that you have so many quests that you could go on for your adventures. So there's just a lot of different ways to earn rewards and, to influence over the city. So I think that there's a lot of options there.
Boy, Brendan, just between you and me, listeners, if you could just not listen right now. Brendan, this is why we bring Lauren. She's got these hot takes. All right, anyway, everyone, come back in the room. Lauren, you couldn't be more right. I think that that is just a brilliant way of looking at things. Lords of Waterdeep, for a worker placement game, it is steeped in, it is soaked in, it is flavor injected with theme. It is not pasted on. It feels everything that's going into this game comes out dripping with the words of R.A. Salvatore, with the theme of a Dungeons and Dragons game. And I think that you're right. If we look over at Wingspan, did they paste that theme on?
Rob, I think there's an issue to be highlighted there, and that is the place. I agree with Lauren, and to a degree with you, that it is the theme and setting that is the sort of the high point of Lords of Waterdeep. That, Lauren called out those campaigns. That is a great example of a way that you could take what is otherwise a kind of boring mechanism and make it rich in story, right? That if you look at the game from a purely mechanical perspective, those are just contracts. You're just filling contracts, you're handing over cubes. But the game names those cubes. They're different kinds of warriors. They're the same characters that you play day in and day out with your D&D group. And those adventures, they're full of theme. I think, Lauren, maybe you could talk a little about this. This is what I see. Maybe you saw it for a different reason, but knowing the games that have come out of XYZ Game Labs and your involvement over there, y'all do a fantastic job thinking through how each component can add to the story being told by games. I don't know if you want to talk at all about maybe a choice that you've made in some of those games over there. What's the XYZ philosophy about working theme and setting into games, and how might we help Wingspan do a little better next time?
Well, first of all, Wingspan has done a great job with their theme, so I don't want to talk smack about Wingspan at all. I don't want,
I'm pretty sure you said Wingspan stinks.
No. I look up to Wingspan. Wow, don't get me in trouble. Okay. But
Hargrave's coming for you.
That's one thing. Like, a lot of people have said that, Lords of Waterdeep, they kind of pasted on the theme. And I think, one thing that Wingspan has done great, and one thing that XYZ does as well, in order to highlight and to lean into the theme and the world, is by doing research. And you could tell that there was a lot of intention in Wingspan when it came to, the actions of the birds. Like, they're scientifically correct. Like, they match the actual natural instincts of the bird species and the environment for that bird. And it's just, you could tell it was so thoughtfully and intentional with their research. So you could tell that it was a research first approach into the product design and therefore game design, right? So that is something that, is something that we love that they did that, and is something that we believe too with our products. Like, we want to understand the audience and the world that we're building it around before we even really get into maybe some of the mechanics, or start including those into the actual functionality of the game, because it really influences everything else.
Truer words have never been spoken. If you think they have, you write them down, you send them to me, and I will throw them in the garbage, because they have not been. Lords of Waterdeep plays in about an hour, 90 minutes. It's a game that you can come back to, highly replayable. This is a game that has, well, you could argue one or two expansions. They both come in the same box, but you could use either or both of the expansions for Waterdeep. And right there, this could all be the same for Wingspan. So there are lots of points of similarity, right down to what, could you call it recipe fulfillment? I'm going to start bringing Wingspan into the conversation here, I guess, is what I'm saying. Are there a fair number of similarities between what you're doing in these two games, Brendan? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Rob, that a lot of the outcomes are the same. You could look at the kinds of contracts that you're fulfilling in Lords of Waterdeep with the adventures as very similar to the end of round bonuses or the private scoring objectives that you have in Wingspan. As you were describing elements of the play, though, I was reminded of, I think, maybe the one thing that, short of theme, the one thing that Lords of Waterdeep might really have over Wingspan is player interaction. I've talked before, in Wingspan, there's a little bit, right? If I could see you're building a great row of egg-laying, cherry-eating, I don't know what, I could grab that bird that you really wanted. But Lords of Waterdeep, right, you're really fighting for those worker placement spots. You get that nasty adventure that you can give to somebody else, and you plop it down right before they're able to fulfill that giant contract that they've been working on for 10 or 12 turns. And you can really knife people in Lords of Waterdeep. And Wingspan, it really encourages a much gentler kind of interaction.
Well, I'm going to ask you this question, Brendan. And Lauren, if you want to pipe in, you feel free. You're a guest in this house. Take your shoes off, put your feet up, make yourself comfortable. Brendan, would you say that Wingspan is a Euro with player interaction?
Oh.
Yes or no?
If I have to, no, there's not player interaction. No, you have your own board. Yeah, I say no.
All right. Lauren, same question to you.
I would honestly say the same thing, because you really are determining what happens to your birds and to the environment. There are some actions where a carnivore can eat another bird. That's about it, though. Like, you are, the king of your own nest, I guess, in Wingspan.
You rule the roost.
What if your nest is in a swamp where the water is very deep? Are you a Lord of Waterdeep then? What if these are the same game?
All right, Lauren, I'm kicking Brendan off the whole show. You're now the new co-host for the rest of the history of the show. Okay, anywho, second question in this series of two questions is this, Brendan. Brendan, is Lords of Waterdeep a Euro game with interaction?
Yeah, it is.
Is it a highly interactive Euro game?
I say no. Not highly interactive. Medium. It is medium
Lauren,
interactive.
Same question to you.
I would say it's medium interactive as well, but I think that, it's so hard because there's so many things that could happen where like for example, if you neglect some of your quests, then you might not be able to work on those points. So yeah, I would have to say that it's probably medium interaction as well. It's not the most interactive I've seen, and it's not so take-backy, but definitely there's more engagement there at the table than Wingspan. So yeah.
Oh, for sure. I just thought maybe this is one of the points, because one of the things, we're doing here, as you well know, both of you, is we are giving people the insights and the information that they need to make informed decisions so they can help us find what game is going to move on here in the tournament. And I think the interactivity of these sort of medium weight Euros could be one of the things that helps decide this. Do you like your Euro to have a lot of interactivity? If so, maybe that's pushing you one way. If not, another. Another thing we talked about is how strong is the theme could be another thing. Is that something that you really care about? Is that something that you're not so worried about? I think what's going to happen is the people are going to go to Twitter. They're going to go to @GameFightShow.
@GameFightShow.
And they're going to vote for either Lords of Waterdeep or they're going to vote for Wingspan, and then we'll really know how they feel about what. Feel free to post a comment on there whenever you're voting about which one you chose and why. There is no rule here against trying to put your thumb on the scale with the other voters, as long as it's all above boards. No money exchanging hands,
No skullport, skullduggery there.
Well, if you do, you just have to remember to take a corruption token.
Rob, I was thinking a little bit more about the interaction, and I stand by my analysis. But I think both games, as you think about them, they do encourage a bit more, right? Wingspan definitely, as you learn to play it more, you start watching when the other players are going to take food, as you try to anticipate what food is going to be available for you in the bird feeder. And if you take one of those birds that rolls the dice that aren't in the bird feeder, it can make or break your day if somebody takes the last die right before you get to go, because then there's nothing to roll. But man, Lords of Waterdeep, those intrigue cards, right? Both games have genius bits of design, but one of my favorite things about Lords of Waterdeep, and I think anybody who's making a worker placement game really needs to pay attention to this, is the way that the intrigue cards work at the harbor. You go there, you put your worker down, you get one of these cards, and then at the end of the round, you get to use your worker again. So the game is basically saying you get a free turn and a card that'll let you knife somebody. And those cards sometimes they're nice. Hey, take a wizard cube, give somebody else a wizard cube. Other times it's mean. It's like everyone has to give you a cleric or $2, right? Or you get $2 if they don't give you a cleric or whatever. Really, I think the addition of those things, was great.
You're even more right than I think you're saying. I think you might have misspoken, because when you go to the harbor, you don't get a card, you use a card. So you get an action that you use to change the game state. Maybe you're giving someone a mandatory quest. Maybe, as you said, you're taking a fair amount of money and someone's taking a reasonable amount of money. Who knows? All sorts of things are happening in those decks, and that's one of the beautiful things about the game, is that game to game, you're often not even going to see the same quests coming up, not even going to see the same intrigue cards coming up. But you're right. The game is quietly telling you, do this thing, because I'm going to heap rewards on you for having done it. Brilliant little piece of design. You're right. Other designers need to pay attention to the great work that Peter Lee and Rodney Thompson were doing with that. But now we've done it. We've broken the seal. We've said the name of game designers. And when you do that in this matchup, then immediately you have to say these two wonderful words, Elizabeth Hargrave.
Yes.
Elizabeth Hargrave, is she responsible for changing the tides of board games? Just a gentle shift that is moving a great body of water that is the sort of canon of board games. I would argue it's looking like, yes, boy, this game certainly has sold a couple copies in its day. As we've mentioned.
I think that's something we really should call out about Wingspan, as you said, Rob, Elizabeth Hargrave changing the direction of the board game hobby. People have been talking for 5-10 years now about how a wider array of themes are available and should be available. But I remember when I got into the hobby, I heard about this cool game called Rococo. But I heard that it was very hard to get, and there were a lot of people who wouldn't play it because it was about making dresses. And of course, the people who wouldn't play it were dudes. Like, I'm not playing a game about making dresses. At one point, they actually talked about retheming the game to be about making video games. Right? Yeah, gross. And when Wingspan came out, Jamie Stegmaier has talked about this a number of times. When he was shopping Wingspan around in August of 2018, the distributors and the retailers said, I don't know. Birds? Really? So he only ordered something like 10 or 12 or 15,000 copies, which sounds like a lot to a small publisher, but for the kinds of games that he publishes, that was a pretty small order. And then he sold out his pre-orders and sold out the whole game by like I think he released it in January, and by February it was impossible to get. People were paying double, triple, quadruple the retail price for it online, and he had to immediately order more. And just a couple months ago, Elizabeth Hargrave tweeted that it sold 750,000 copies so far. And I think you can point to that game as a wake-up call for the industry that, maybe people want to play something a little different. Yeah. And, shortly after that, Eagle Gryphon, they reprinted Rococo, and it's still a game about making dresses.
Yeah. I would love to know what happened to Parfum since then, too.
Yeah. But no, you bring up a valid point. Like, people want to learn from games. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's one thing that Wingspan does is that, like, you could actually learn about birds through a game. And you don't even realize it, but, it's like gamified learning. Like, it's wonderful. But also, too, it's like I could go to any game store and look at the shelf and I could see probably more than 20 games that remind me of Lords of Waterdeep, just from like artwork alone and from theme alone. And what's so special about Wingspan is that it really carves itself out like a little space in the store as like, wow, this is something that I'm going to remember because it has the blue background with the bird, and you will always remember that. And that's something that I think a lot of publishers can learn is how can you make your product stand out? And thinking more of a game as a product instead of just a game is another thing too, because that's where you get into like the product design, but also like, how do you market it as well?
Couldn't agree more. One of the beautiful things about this game, and I will tell you, in the years and years that we have been running the March Mayhem tournament, this is one of 2 games that has come out, made it onto the bracket, where all of the designers are women. I will avoid the designing women reference.
Where's that game? Prospero Hall?
But the artists are also women on this game, and I think that's another lesson that should be taken away from this game. When you get someone to the table who has a different perspective, and in this case, just a woman. Like, it's not like she's from Mars. She's not like an alien. She's
Rob, I have it on good authority from the 80s that women are from Venus.
Yes.
Well, that's why I said she's not from Mars. Look at what she's done. A, she's made a wonderful game. B, she's made a beautiful game. And C, she's made a game that almost 1 million people have purchased. How many games out there have sold that kind of numbers? If the industry isn't paying attention to this, then I am going to pull my hair out. And it's very difficult because I'm a bald guy.
And also too, like, I think what she has honestly done is truly a wonderful service to the game industry, because what she has taught us is that you don't need to follow by the rules. You don't need to make the same crunchy D&D themed like game that every other previous publisher and designer and artist has like been commissioned to do. You know what I mean? Like, you could break those rules and it could be a success story, and you could make whatever you want. And I'm very excited for the explosion that I anticipate will happen as a result of this.
Yeah, for sure.
And you know what they call that? They call that leadership. And kudos to her. And let's go ahead and give Stonemaier Games some credit here for working with her. But, you know, we don't want to give them too much credit because they've probably also made a couple bucks already off of this.
Well,
a couple bucks.
One more.
That 750,000 copies, how many of those people have bought at least one expansion?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hopefully lots, because the expansions are great. Another thing that I wanted to mention, particularly about Elizabeth Hargrave, but I've also noticed about Beth Sobel, one of the artists. And I can't say that I'm as aware of the other artists' presence on social media, but Elizabeth Hargrave has made ample opportunity of the moment she has, right? As perhaps the hottest designer in the field right now. She has really made some effort to help contribute to a conversation in which the industry not only notices like, hey, maybe our games don't need to all be about people rampaging through dungeons or shooting aliens, but also maybe one way to find games that approach the genre differently, that approach the hobby differently, is to see if we can find people who have been underrepresented in the production and design sphere, and listen to what they're saying in the hobby. I think we've, just like we've seen a renaissance of themes in the last few years, the industry has been having a real conversation about thinking very carefully about what it means to have representation, not just in the art, but also in the people that are that we're employing and we're championing, and frankly, the countries that we're getting games from. We're seeing a plethora of games that aren't Eurocentric in either design or origin, and as a result, we're getting some amazing stuff in the last few years, and I think Wingspan has accelerated all of that.
Here.
Yeah, the diversity in this industry is so important. Like, not just for, like the artwork has representation. No, it really is a thought process. It is really about the culture and drive for how we make games, but also like how do we think through the choices that you can make. And I think just in general, working with diverse groups of people will just make a better product in general.
Yeah, once again, the more people, the more viewpoints, the better. How this is so difficult to get going in the industry, it's disappointing, it's depressing, but hopefully it's changing, right?
Absolutely. I see it changing.
Huzzah.
And Wingspan, you're definitely a game that we could look up to. and that's awesome.
Speaking of publishers that have different voices at their table, not only on their cards, Lauren, you are one of the elite team of expert game creators over at XYZ Game Labs.
XYZ Game Labs.
We would be remiss in our duties. And if you are remiss in your duties, folks, please see your doctor. If we didn't talk about what's going on over at XYZ. Lauren, tell us a little about XYZ and what you have got.
All right. So we are a Chicago independent board game publishing company. Our motto is to invent new gamers. And we take that very seriously. So that means, it doesn't necessarily mean that we won't ever make like a dungeon crawl game. But right now we've been focusing on games that appeal to niche audiences that would otherwise not be interested in hobby gaming, or or maybe is interested in an IP like Borderlands and maybe would want to explore that world more through a card game like our Borderlands Tiny Tina's Robot Tea Party game. Or it is a, kind of like a gateway game that is a little bit simpler for kids like Robot Lab. But, our most recent success story has been Arch Ravels, which is a board game about knitting and crocheting and fiber arts and how do you manage all your yarn, which is your resource. And
which is, I know that's a problem for a lot of my friends in real life, managing all their yarn.
It is
so it's a game It was time.
Yeah,
had come.
and it was a game that was inspired by a knitter who came to our booth and says, I have all this yarn. I don't know what to do with it. I want a game about this problem that I experienced in my life. And it's so funny that she gave us a soundbite. I wish we remember her name. I wish I don't know. We didn't know at that moment that she was going to be the inspiration for our travels.
Nice.
But whoever you are, if you remember us, please reach out. Anyway, but yeah, it's so that is a game that our backers have now. We actually just launched it at retail launch it, so it should be available at your friendly local game store. And yeah, so that has been our most recent success. And then we have a Kickstarter coming up, which entails 3 Quarks games. So Quarks is another line, which is basically pocket-sized games. So the idea is you can learn it in under 5 minutes. You could play it within 15 to 30 minutes, and it's something that you could carry with you. So it has a small carbon footprint, so that you could carry it with you, in your backpack, whatever. Through a lot of different ways, whether it be product design in terms of size, so it's small, we're inventing new gamers, right? Through theme, like a licensed IP like Borderlands, maybe they'll get into hobby gaming, or the harder of the ways of capturing a new audience is what we've done through our travels, which is truly understanding the culture, the people, the world of fiber arts, their memes. You have to know everything about them in order to execute a game that they could see themselves in, right?
This ties in so beautifully. Here we have in Arch Revels a game about set collection, about recipe fulfillment. Does this game fit in on the shelf beside Wingspan? Does this game belong in the collection of someone who enjoys Lords of Waterdeep? Brendan, answer this difficult question.
I think it does. Both Wingspan and Lords of Waterdeep would probably be in the category I would call light hobby games, as opposed to Arch Revels, which I think is a welcoming game. It is a game that you could sit down and play with somebody who's never played any hobby games, and they would be able to understand it. They would get how it works quickly. They would have fun. And frankly, if they're a knitter, this was the thing I was going to call out as a commitment to another audience. I got my copy of Arch Revels. I opened it up. There's a bit of paper in there that is clearly not for me. It's like some sort of formula for making an octopus or something. And there's all these words in there I don't understand. And I'm like, oh, this is for knitters. Literally a thing for knitters in the game.
For crocheters.
You don't get to use it. A
crocheters.
I don't even know what hobby I'm talking about. It's amazing. Yeah, I think Arch Revels is definitely one of those games that it's really fun to play. If you're with other hobby gamers, it's a great start off the night or end the night kind of appetizer. You could chat while you're playing it. It's sort of light and breezy, but it's also a game you could definitely show to people who've never played anything in the hobby sphere before, and they would both enjoy it and say, all right, what's next? And you're like, I got this game about birds.
And I will tell you, the good listener, that Brendan and I have probably couldn't count the number of different versions of Arch Revels that I've played at different playtesting events, both public and private. But what I can tell you for sure is that this is a game that has been honed, that has been crafted, that has been refined. The sharp edges have been removed. This is a game, as Brendan was saying, this is a game that you can sit down and play quickly, and that doesn't mean that this is a trivial game. That doesn't mean that this is something that was just tossed off. No, the hard task is to make something that is elegant, and that is what they have done here, our friends at XYZ Game Labs. I highly recommend that you find your way over to your FLGS and barge in the door. I want you to just push the door open and say lustily, "Take me to your Arch Revels!" And if they don't ask you to leave or call the authorities, I want you to go buy a copy. If they don't have one, tell them to get
our games.
Yes.
That's right.
And I would also recommend that you head over to XYZGameLabs.com.
Yes.
Or seek out XYZ Game Labs on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on all the soch.
Yes.
Right?
You guys have a Tinder?
You guys are out there.
No. We do have a TikTok. We do have a TikTok as well. But no Tinder, no OnlyFans, just Instagram, Facebook, the regular stuff.
I think you should make an OnlyFans that is like breezy lounge music, slow motion videos of your components.
Or just that video of Noah testing the board.
That's a premium cost there.
Gang, I am going to tell you that if you let me, I would stay on the line with Brendan and Lauren all day. Mostly Lauren. But
That's fair.
That's fair.
The time has come to release you into the wild to resolve this. The last bout in the semifinals. The next time we see you, it's going to be Sunday for the live show. Boy, are we excited for that. I'm going to remind you, go to Twitter at GameFight Show.
At GameFight Show.
Vote. Let's see what Eleanor has to say about the results from our last bouts.
All right, everybody, it's time to hear those results. The first semifinal bout between Race for the Galaxy and Everdell was as exciting as they come, just like its outcome. Everdell won the race, as Race for the Galaxy will have to tune up their jump drive for their runner-up bout. Back to you all.
Oh boy. Well, Brendan, that's the first game going into the finals, huh?
And a well-deserved game it is, Rob. I can't say I saw it coming, but I knew it would be one of those two.
You're so good at winnowing these things down. Your insights are so incredible, Brendan. Oh, boy. Anywho, I want to thank the listeners for listening. I want to thank the Eleanor for Eleanoring. I want to thank Brendan for keeping it real. And I want to thank Lauren for joining us here. Lauren, your presence is always a delight. What a treat to be able to spend some time with you here in the virtual space. Friends, don't sleep on going and checking out what XYZ Game Labs is up to. And Lauren is going to be the source of much of what you hear when you tune into their wave.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me.
An absolute pleasure. All right, gang. See you Sunday.
Game Fight Show.
Game Fight Show.
Game Fight Show.
Nice.
Brought to you by
Rattlebox Games.